This is my next book review. Today it is the famed George R.R. Martin's anthology, Dreamsongs I. I own Dreamsongs I and Dreamsongs II, but I've only gotten most of the way through this one. It's an anthology of his short stories and novellas and things like that. And it goes sequentially. So the first story in this first edition is one of his first early published stories, and it goes on from there. So, his early stuff is pretty weak, but it's still interesting to watch him develop. As you probably know from his books, he's very influenced by J.R.R. Tolkien, and some of his writing has some of that Lord of the Rings vibe. I would say my favorite Lord of the Rings was the first one, Fellowship of the Ring, because it develops more of the world and a sense of mystique before the action kicks in, and he's very good at developing worlds and vibe himself. That's my connection, so good job. You followed your influence, and perhaps you improved on it. He is a master of pathos, so there's a lot of sadness in these stories, but because he develops really interesting characters, in my opinion. And of course, we all know he's good with details, especially food. He doesn't do too much food details in this, but there's plenty of details overall. So that's good. And we get to watch him grow, so his writing does improve over time. And we see the evolution of some of his themes. One of these short stories in here is called The Ice Dragon. So obviously right there, his theme of fire and ice is developed right early on, and he claims that he has still to this point the only guy to have written a book or a story about an ice dragon. Most dragons are fiery and things like that, but this one is actually an ice dragon, so he's very proud of that. That is one of the sad stories. Not terribly sad, but a little sad. We also see some themes in his writing, themes and also places and people that recur in various books and novellas and short stories. For example, Celia's world is a planet that appears in a lot of his different stories. So he's developing his own sci-fi universe. He does autobiographical notes between a few of the pieces. He'll do like an autobiographical note, and then represent 3 stories, right, and talk about those, and then do about autobiographical note or autobiography. He gets a little defensive in places about his writing, but overall I'd say it's pretty interesting to see, the mind of a writer and how he develops his career and things like that. He's known for sci-fi and fantasy, but he also briefly delved into horror, but I guess he started trying to develop it during a time when the different genres were, changing in popularity and things like that. So there's 2 that I've just read recently that are sci-fi horror combinations, and they're both considered to be relatively popular short stories that he says get reprinted a lot. One is called Meat House Man, which is about a guy who is a controller of corpses, meaning he's sort of like a zombie man. So he controls about 5 or 6 different zombies simultaneously with he sort of radiates. They have these little electronic chips or something, so these corpses walk around, and he's very good at developing them and things like that. So they do manual labor that's too horrible for living beings. They go into radioactive areas and things like that. And that's the main character of that is sort of a sad story, because he's very good at his task, but he lives a very lonely life, and he chases these different women, and with various results. But overall, it's a very sad story. So it could be sci-fi or horror, or it could just be drama. He says that's his most reprinted one ever, or at least for the early era. For short stories, and then he says, but I think a little better one is called Sand Kings, which is also a mixture of sci-fi and horror, about another guy who's much more sadistic. He likes to get animals to fight each other, and so he gets these very elaborate cage where there's 4 different colonies of Sand Kings, which everyone initially thinks are ants, but really are much more intelligent, though they still have a hive mind. And he sets them to war, but his sadistic nature really brings about a series of most karmic bad things to happen. And one of the interesting things about it is that the cage, he sets up a hologram of his own face as their god, and these Sand Kings they each do their own sort of sculpture tribute on the facade of their hive buildings, And so you look at the variation of the way they draw his face and stuff, and it's very interesting. And as he becomes a more sadistic god over time, it becomes sort of a variation on the Dorian Gray story, if you know that one. So it's pretty interesting. What's good about this is it gets better as it goes along, because his writing improves. So I recommend it. There's a Dreamsongs 2, which I have not yet read. I imagine the writing gets even better in that. And yeah, enjoy. So check it out, and remember, if you can't do, review.